Witam serdecznie. Ja przygotowałam wykład po angielsku, ponieważ wydawało mi się, że będzie dzisiejsza cała sesja przedpołudniowa po angielsku, także jeżeli pozwolicie, czy tak możemy zrobić? Na 100%? Dobra. So imagine, September 15th, 2008. You wake up, open the news, and there is a groundbreaking information. Lehman Brothers just went bust. Well, this point, nobody could imagine that it will trigger an economic crisis, a financial crisis globally, and then an economic crisis in Europe, which initiated political unrest, extremist parties getting to the European Parliament, to the national parliaments. Greece, Brexit, as we talk now, may shake ultimately the European Union and its single market currency. Now, this was a day when I met with a group of 17 other people for the first time in my life. We also met with President Barroso in Budapest. And we were wondering, what are we to do? Because this was the beginning of probably my biggest professional adventure. We were to redesign the way European Union finances and manages its innovation system. I knew very little about innovation systems, about government policies, about how innovation is being induced in our global networked environment. But I was totally fascinated by the mandate, 300 million euro. It's an experimentary budget at the European policy level. And the people I was working with, they were fascinating for me, a generation of Europeans who created the post-industrial revolution, who created the economic growth for the last 3 decades. And then suddenly we were here, me coming from the emerging markets of Central and Eastern Europe, along with my colleague Lina Vik, a former Skype director. And we were wondering what this will mean for Europe if suddenly the financial system, which is a complex system, somewhere at the periphery, an accident of one single financial institution will trigger a total collapse of what is the basis of free market economy for the European Union. I knew very little about innovation policy. After 6 years, I believe I had a way of learning by doing to develop a very new model how innovation is financed. This emerged into a multi-billion European institution, the European Institute of Innovation and Development, and I will refer to it a little bit later. But today, what I would like to talk about is a publication. The title is Poland, Emerging Innovation Leader of the Visegrad Group. I wrote a new perspective on how I look at Poland. And I believe it is important because for those of you who follow the news, follow the rankings, Poland is one of the least innovative countries in Europe. And still, this is the only country that achieved over 20% GDP growth over the last 5 years, the last 6 years since the crisis broke out, versus -1 in Eurozone, +1 in Visegrad Group countries. And when we look at the economic research and business practice, the link between growth and innovation seems to be automatic. So here is something counterintuitive. How a country that is considered so uninnovative can generate so much value? I believe that we deserve a reflection here. 25 years of reforms, 20 years of NATO, 10 years in the European Union. Quite often I meet Poles in many different environments in the world, and quite often I realize that we tend not to feel ready to take a leadership position. We tend to believe that others know better. We tend to try to catch up rather than leap forward. And suddenly, we should realize that we are today in a very different position, that we've been experimenting for the last quarter of the century. that achieved an unprecedented historic success on a global scale. There's no other country in the world that has this kind of track record of uninterrupted growth and development over the last 25 years. So what, for example, World Bank experts say, they say that Poland has not been in such a golden period as today over the last 500 years. What does this mean for us? Well, we should be proud. So this report, now how do I, okay. How do I quantify our success? The two numbers, always the numbers tell a story, and these are quite breakthrough numbers. 2 years, 1991, 2012. We had 400,000 students at a time and 56,000 graduates. Today, we have over 1,700,000 students and 500,000 graduates. Can you imagine that this one number describes what happened to us as a society, to us as individuals, and to us as a country? But education is something that I'm totally fascinated with, and I start with education because we are at a very special initiative. When you look what happens with education is that traditionally there was a very rigid university system. Academia is extremely conservative, whether in Poland or elsewhere. However, with the digital economy, what we witness is that there is a big disruption to the whole system. Institutions like Digital University suddenly emerge out of nowhere, out of the belief that there is a need to change the society, as Magda and Jovita believe in it. There are Singularity University, there is Khan Academy. People suddenly, there's all MOOCs, the massive online open courses that offers lectures by Harvard, Stanford, and other excellent schools, teachers and professors, and suddenly you can get educated anywhere. You don't need to go to school. The peer-to-peer education is one of the most fascinating ways of how we learn. But the most fascinating is on-the-job learning, so learning by doing. And when I look at my daughters, they seem to kind of take it easy with the education system. They have a distance to the official message they get and to their own narrative, how they see the world. Quite skeptical with the official message. I started with education because it is a very critical component of what I believe is the driving force of innovation. These are entrepreneurial innovation ecosystems. Quite some time ago, there was a theory by Michael Porter about clusters, and the whole theory was that the phenomenon of the Silicon Valley, which is one of the top hubs in the global innovation network, it comes from the fact that there is a co-location of excellent universities, excellent industry, a group of talent, and all this creates an ecosystem, tightly knit, tightly interconnected, where people flow between companies, where knowledge flows between companies and capital. But what we witness with the evolution of the network economy is that actually the value of Silicon Valley, its innovation powerhouse, doesn't come necessarily only from being tightly knit locally. It's critical. But what is even more critical is the fact that it is loosely coupled globally. When we look at the number of the Silicon Valley companies that are run by immigrants or that are owned by immigrants, suddenly we realize that this migrant workforce connects the entrepreneurial ecosystem and allows for sourcing the knowledge, for crowd sourcing the knowledge from all around the globe. Therefore, when we look about innovation in Poland, I started with education, but then we will move to research and innovation. But let me give you some numbers about education. So we talked about the absolute numbers, but the investment in education increased by 70% to over €1 billion over the last 10 years. What is more important, it's not only the quantity, but the quality of education dramatically changed. Poland has the 14th best in the world education system by the OECD PISA results, which measures competences of 15 years old, how with their reading skills, understanding of reading, math, and science. 14th best in the world. And imagine, we have the 4th best in the European Union, along with the Netherlands and Estonia. How could this happen? What did we do right? Imagine that Poles not only get the schooling right, but we are the 9th top nation with English skills. Could you imagine? According to English Proficiency Index. Quite astonishing. And imagine that over the last 10 years in our region, there were 1.7 million jobs created for STEM graduates. STEM stands for science, technology, and engineering and math. Out of this, 1.3 million in Poland. What a powerhouse. But the problem with education is that it tends to be quite academic in Poland. And when we talk with industry, quite often they say, we appreciate that there is such a volume of educated people, but actually we get them and we need to train them on the job. The model of technical education, of engineering education, which is leading in the thinking about how education should be, it's a T model. It's T model because you have wide shoulders and you have a strong root. The root is a technical expertise, but this T, the shoulders, comes from quite different qualities and competences and skills that usually are not embraced by our technical universities, not to mention universities and medical schools. The T, these broad shoulders, what are they? Well, they are competences that are critical to succeed, such as leadership, teamwork, ability to communicate across cultures in multidisciplinary skills, entrepreneurial skills, understanding of the business environment, understanding of social media, understanding of how information spreads and how power is created in innovation networks. All these sorts of things, how to bring a team together and create collective intelligence and collective creativity to come up with a solution that was not there before. It's a critical component of what engineering education should be about. I think that Poland still has some way to go, and I believe that the digital university at a certain point may come to thinking about this aspect as well. When we talk about okay, so we may say that Poland has a strong education, with this caveat. We can say that Poland is very innovative. But what does this innovation mean? Very often in Europe, when you say innovation, when people say innovation, what they really mean is technology. Well, if they come from tech companies. If they say innovation in academic area, what they mean is research and patents. Is something tangible, quantified. But actually, when we look at innovation in Poland and in other Visegrad Group countries, we realize that we are not that good at all with investment in R&D. Our patenting activity is very modest, at the level of 500 patents per year, at the so-called European filing, the European patents. Well, that's not much for a country. It can be sometimes one or two academic institutions in the world. When we think innovation in Poland, do we mean technology? Quite often, yes. But at the same time, Magda had an excellent lecture just a second ago, and she was telling about all the disruptive forces that come not out of the technology, but out of all different sorts of disruptiveness coming from the business model, from social developments, from changing demographic patterns. Let's take internet. One could say that what a great innovation, isn't it? Changed totally our world, the way we live, the way we work, the way we entertain. Was it a technological innovation? What do you think? Yes or no? Yes, no, yes, no. Okay, it was an old technology when it was deployed for the purpose we're using it today. Internet was a NASA-developed technology for dispersed communication. And this military technology was deployed or was thought of by Tim Berners-Lee to be packed with what we know as World Wide Web, that is putting the content that can be shared and distributed over the internet. And only then it became a disruption. And it was actually Tim Berners-Lee's decision not to patent it. He wanted the World Wide Web to be open, so anyone could share. And only because it was open, it created a myriad of individual and collective milieu, where people share knowledge, when they exchange knowledge, when they create value. I was impressed with the number of funding raised by Kickstarter. Can you imagine what a disruption? But internet in itself, its disruptiveness did not come from technology. The same can be said of Facebook, even Google, Amazon, all these technologies, all these tech companies, multi-billion companies that didn't exist a decade ago, were not really driven by the technological advance. And in the networked environment, the value, how innovation is being translated into value, comes from even something more complex than translation. We have a piece of technology, we translate into a product, service, process, or we have a piece of research, we commercialize it, we license or build a company. What we observe in a network environment is that innovation is a creative process that is able to include different agents into a definition of a problem and creating a solution. And I have an attitude when I think about innovation, I think about it in terms of a process rather than of process of innovating that starts with human creativity and then quite often through what can be named or not as a design thinking process leads to an unprecedented or sometimes very simple yet brilliant solution. Also, when we think about innovation, quite often people say, oh, it's about industry. And indeed, the large companies were the driving force of innovation from the Industrial Revolution. When you think today about, let me say, Siemens, Citroën, Lafarge, Vuitton, what do we think? Brands, right? European brands, multinationals. But do we recall that all these names were actually people's names? Right? That they were started by a single innovator, sometimes a family business, and then translated and grown globally. But this was under the times where time was kind of linear, and when the innovation process quite often started with an idea that was developed and tested in a lab, and then was prototyping, then developing a scalable solution, then deployed in the market, and then the success or failure of the market would feed into the initial product, thinking about the next research project. And this moved like this in a waves or in a scale, in a linear way. But today, innovation is not linear at all. It's very chaotic, actually, and it's very unpredictable. I talked quite often with R&D directors in multinationals, and what their problem is actually not the access to ideas, because ideas are free today. You just go on the net, you crowdsource ideas, you open a call, a competition, people throw up ideas into the air. But what is the problem is to have a process that can distill the good ideas and eliminate the waste of the ideas that are being sunk that could probably be disruptive to the innovation. So reinvigorating the innovation processes within large companies is again a big issue. Now, in my opinion, what is missing in all these innovation ecosystems, except for some very hot spots on the globe, is entrepreneurship. And I'm so very proud that Poles are so entrepreneurial. Well, are we really entrepreneurial? When we look at Polish SMEs, small and medium-sized companies, imagine that only, according to statistics, which of course may not reflect totally the reality and so on, but only 23%, let me get the numbers right, 23% of Polish small companies are innovative, meaning that they deploy a new product or a new process. Product, service, process. Well, this should be benchmarked with the EU average of 49%. So we have a myriad of companies, over 98% of Polish companies are small companies, small and micro companies, not innovative at all. How about mid-sized companies? Well, 40% of Polish companies versus 65% in the European Union, still lagging behind. Actually, the big companies are doing quite well. 68% are innovative versus 80% in Europe. But what does this mean? This means that indeed, when we say innovation, we think big industry. But what about this entrepreneurial component? What does this mean in the context of large industry? Well, it means that the term intrapreneurship, so ability of a company to commercialize the know-how, the knowledge, the patents that are in the company. It also means ability to outsource and to open innovation, to include all possible suppliers, clients, even competitors into the innovation process that can lead to a development of a new venture. But what does entrepreneurship mean in terms of education? Have you heard of a phrase, entrepreneurial university? Not really. So traditionally, universities are about knowledge, transfer of knowledge, and socialization. When you leave certain school, you are believed to be more or less like other alumni. Now, question, how would you know that a person graduated from Harvard? Well, he or she will tell you about this in the second sentence you talk with that person. And there are a number, but quite frankly, MIT graduates, MIT is one of the best engineering schools in the world, will not tell about this. This somehow will come out in a conversation, and then it will be a big surprise that a modest person can be so brilliant. But entrepreneurial university is a different concept for what an institution should be. So should really universities and academics drive growth of companies? What do you think? Should academics start a company? Can it be a success? No, of course not. An academic is excellent in doing research, right? But today, if you don't have access to knowledge, and if you cannot partner, if you cannot team up with academics, it will be very difficult to abstract this knowledge that there is in the academia. So an entrepreneurial university is a university that understands that it's of strategic importance to help, or at least not to disturb, when students and academics want to start businesses. One of the most fascinating experiments in Europe is called Aalto University in Helsinki. It was created a couple of years ago as a merger of the best technical university in Finland, a business school, and an academy of art and design. And when I talked with the rector of the university, I said, how does this happen that Finland has never been strong in entrepreneurship? I mean, there was Nokia, and then a long silence. So suddenly when Nokia fell down, what happened was that when employees left, they all were searching of opportunities, no opportunities on the job market. They had to create their own. Students realized that after economic crisis, also they will not be able to find lifelong employment. And all this stirred up an entrepreneurial fever with Alto Entrepreneurial Society, Venture Garage, and Startup Sauna. Startup Sauna, imagine that you have at the heart of the university campus a place that looks like a creative chaos, full of colors, full of people coming in, coming out, desks, somebody's eating, somebody's talking, somebody's typing. And then in the middle of this, so in the heart of a campus, a building, a garage, very simple from the outside, very creative inside, there's a sauna. And you have a row of shoes outside the sauna, so people are barefoot or in socks. But they all have laptops. They all sit, you can look at them through a window. You cannot hear what they talk about, but you can see the emotions. You can see the creativity behind it. And actually, the mythical garage, Silicon Valley garage, when HP was born, Europe has its own version, and in Finland it happens to be a sauna. Something different in Berlin, but in Finland it's a sauna. So the students there decided to drive the entrepreneurial movement, and what they do basically, they have a one-year project where they get funding from the university with no strings attached. They can design their strategy, how to get the best deals in the Baltic region, this is of their interest, and have them come for a mentoring program with international mentors from all around the world and help them accelerate their ventures when being in part of a very dynamic ecosystem. So a university allows this to happen, finance this, and when I talked with Professor Tula Terry and I said, how come that you allowed this to happen? What did you do? What was the university policy? And she said with a one sentence, I try not to disturb them. So this is the university policy to become more entrepreneurial. But actually, everybody thinks that Stanford is the icon for entrepreneurial university. But not many people know that actually Stanford came while the revolution, semiconductor revolution, was already happening in the valley. So it was not the university per se who was at the forefront. It was very much connected, and Dean Turman, who created the science campus right in the heart of the Palo Alto, was definitely a critical element, but he was not the one who kind of moved it as an avant-garde. When I look at American universities, they are heading the list of international rankings, excellent in research, but quite difficult in translation. Princeton, University of Michigan, Texas University, they all are trying to transform their ecosystem into an entrepreneurial place. Because what we witness is happening, actually, is what I refer to as the network of networks. We have this tightly knit, locally networks of researchers, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, policymakers. They all interconnect, they multi-layer, and they switch. So the value actually locally is created when all these networks attract top talent, top entrepreneurial talent, risk capital, and commercialable knowledge. And all this flows across the globe pretty freely. Now, this is a graph from the publication, and this is the graph that puts most interest on international investors when they think about innovation. It shows employment of persons with tertiary education in science and technology in thousands. And it basically shows the potential of Poland. So we can also think about innovation basically as people. As simple as this, having access to top talent, to people who are able to create and to deploy what they come up with, really drive value. And now the question of value, because we talk about innovation, about growth, development, what industry needs, what universities need, what small companies need, but actually this value is a very interesting concept. Because if you're part of an ecosystem, you're part of a network, and you need to communicate and to collaborate between academics and between entrepreneurs, value means something very different for them, doesn't it? Those of you who come from academia, your success is defined as a number of publications, a number of citations, impact factor. When you come from a for-profit company, well, your shareholders define the value. When you come from government or from society defined as the NGO sector, you talk about stakeholders, you talk about society at large, about next generations, about underprivileged societies. So the question of value is a very interesting concept when we talk about innovation and how Poland could advance. I truly believe that if we had a vision for what we want our country to be in 5, 10, 25 years' time, then probably this would allow us to develop a very different innovation policies at the level of universities, at the level of Polish industry, and at the level of international investors and small companies. One of the biggest surprise, I was for quite some years a faculty at the University of Michigan. Imagine that their College of Engineering started an entrepreneurship center, and quite often 7,000 students were passing through their elective courses on entrepreneurship. But what was most surprising was that 50% of them were interested in what is social entrepreneurship. So they were not really interested at the level of being at a school, undergrad or graduate school, about making money. Money is very important, but actually what this generation cared for was about impact. So they would go to Detroit and try to create a fresh food service for a community where obesity is a big problem. Or they would develop different distant learning mechanism to help students communicate with what was happening in the class. So social entrepreneurship is again a very different concept from how the world defines value today. And I think Poland, for some reason, I believe that with this phenomenal transformation of society, we have the values that position us very strongly to become leaders of the transformation of what Europe will become. One of the tiny elements of this is the wealth index. So when you look at one of the problems in societies is the rate, what percentage of society controls how much wealth. And the bigger the percentage, the more extreme differences, the more unequal the society is. And we know that inequality sooner or later leads to unrest. So Poland is one of the few countries where this index actually diminished. So from 70% controlling 10% of wealth, we have 60% now controlling the 10%. The 10% controlled 70, now controls 60. Visegrad Group, formerly Visegrad Triangle, and this puts simply a graphic under the potential Poland has to become the leader of innovation in our region. Warsaw, Wrocław, and Kraków are, in terms of defined as the number of jobs for engineers and technicians, this shows the potential where so many companies, foreign companies, invest in Poland and create what is called knowledge spillovers. Knowledge spillover, an interesting concept because it creates an innovation blowback. When you have a company, foreign company coming to an emerging markets, they quite often come with an imperialistic perspective that they know better what to do in the market and that they will drive growth and development. But what we witness pretty soon and what I've been researching is that people on the floor level learn pretty fast. Some companies, like Toyota, for example, have a very specific culture based on ability to absorb the innovation coming from the bottom floor, from the factory floor. Other companies, quite often engineering companies from Western Europe, no names to be given here, have a very paternalistic perspective. But what happens is that people learn absorb the knowledge, but still have the ability to innovate. And sooner or later, they create an innovation blowback that challenges the incumbents. We witness the how much market share the large European multinationals are losing over the last years in the emerging markets of China, India, or Brazil. This graph is really the core of the problem. What I believe Poland should be heading to should really help Polish companies become more innovative. This should be the goal. And by more innovative, I mean that the innovation should be defined, again, not as products and services they deploy to the market, but as their ability to come up with innovative solutions, to be globally embedded in innovation ecosystems, to be able to collaborate with universities, with industry, to be part of a larger innovation ecosystem. How this can be done? Well, there are usually two barriers which are most critical to high-growth enterprises. One is access to capital, growth capital, debt or equity, and the second one is access to entrepreneurial know-how. And when you talk with people from venture industry, they will say, oh, there is such an oversupply of funding that Polish SMEs have valuations over the sky. We go to invest in Berlin or in Prague. When you talk to SMEs, they say, no, there's not enough funding to bridge the liquidity gap. That is the funding to come from €500,000 to €2 million. But what is really the critical problem is the ability to absorb the entrepreneurial knowledge, how to grow the companies. So to take business angels, serial entrepreneurs, and put them on a spotlight and celebrate what they do. Because they actually have this intangible knowledge, the ability to help people, all different participants of the innovation ecosystem, to get together, to create a project, and come up with value. I talked a little bit about my background. And I believe that the way I talk about innovation and I think about the world in a systemic way reflects my background, my experience, my hands-on experience. I was one of the core team building the new European institution and the new model. Now Poland becomes one of the major players in the EIT, European Institute of Innovation and Technology, with Kraków and Wrocław being strongly embedded into how the flow of knowledge, talent, and capital will come up and dynamize European innovation for the coming years. I'm also an expert to the World Economic Forum on collaborative innovation. And here the government policy is critical to understand that innovation is not only about investment or increasing the funding in R&D. This is extremely important, and Poland must do it. And I believe that with 105 billion euro coming to Poland over the next 7 years, that this money will be smartly invested, whether it comes from a pocket for research and innovation or structural funds, that this will be invested in human infrastructure, in creating platforms to interconnect globally and to attract the critical mass. I've been cruising the world, working at different universities. I've been doing research and learning by doing. What does this mean to innovate and to create value? My book will come up this year. It's called Innovation and Entrepreneurship, a Growth Model for Europe Beyond the Crisis. Unfortunately, it's still very valid, because when we read news, when we look at data, Europe has a huge problem. And I believe that Poland, with its dynamic young population, with our drive to succeed, and with our broader vision for what a society is, I think we will take a leadership role. Thank you so much.